everyone, Rachel Profit here with 5 new tips for the Accounts Receivable Clerk this time. I am a white female with reddish brown hair that's up today. My pronouns are she, her, and today I'm wearing a pink shirt with a black cami underneath. I'm in my office as usual with my epic sticker wall behind me. All our tips today are designed to make you a champ at entering customer payments. So let's dive in with the first tip. For my first tip, I'm going to show you how you can search for customers using the name rather than using the drop-down box to search for a customer in the name column when you're entering a payment. So I'm logged into Dynamics 365 Finance as an Accounts Receivable Clerk, and I'm going to go ahead and start off by clicking on the Customer Payments workspace. This will open up a new page where you can see and do many of the actions that you need to manage payments as an Accounts Receivable Clerk. I'm going to get started by simply clicking on this tile called Record Customer Payment. This will open up the Payment Journal page with the cursor already in the journal name field with a new journal batch created, and all I need to do is select that journal name or type it in and press Tab. Now I'm ready to start entering the customer payments. I'm going to do all of my payment transaction and processing by using the Enter Customer Payments form. So I'll click Enter Customer Payments, and this will bring me into the Enter Customer Payments page. I like this page because it gives me everything that I need in a single view to enter and settle payments. It can reduce a lot of clicking that's required when you need to do this task on a repetitive basis. So for this first tip, I'm here in the customer field, and instead of clicking on the drop-down box and scrolling through the list or clicking on the name drop-down and then typing in some criteria that I want to search by and clicking apply, I'm simply going to start typing into this field. For my example, I'm typing forest, and you can see that the drop-down box automatically opens for me and starts that search. If I wanted to instead search for cave, I can start typing again, and you can see that drop-down box automatically updates. For this example, I will be using Forest Wholesales, so I can press enter or click on that and the system will automatically select it for me. Now I'm going to hit the tab button on my keyboard to move on over to my payment reference field. This is where I am going to, enter in the details that come with this payment. This could be a check number, it could be a wire reference number, it could be a lockbox reference number, whatever the payment reference is. So in my case, let's just assume it's a check number, and I'm going to type in that check number. Now, for tip number 2, I want to talk about setting up your tabbing sequence. You may or may not have noticed that I actually had to click tab multiple times in order to get my cursor over to this payment reference field. So what I want to do is show you how we can update that tab sequence and make the number of keystrokes required much easier for you based on what your requirements are. I'm going to start with this company field, although maybe sometimes I have payments for another company. If you don't, and your payments are always in a single company, you'll probably either want to hide this field or at least skip the tab sequence. Obviously, you're going to base this off of your business processes and what makes most sense for your business. I'm going to right-click on the drop-down box and select Personalize Company. This will open up a little dialog here, and I can indicate if I want to hide the field, mark it as required, or skip it. Let's say I want to skip it, so I can simply do that. If there are a lot of fields that you want to skip on your form, you can do that very easily by using the Personalization toolbar. You can access that by clicking on the Options tab in the Action pane and then selecting Personalize this pane, and then you will select the Skip option in the toolbar. When you select this option, you'll notice the field that I already set up for skipping is highlighted in orange, but if I also want to set other fields to skip automatically, I can do that. So let's say, for example, I want to skip over the payment date. It's always going to default to today, and maybe my business process is that we always use today's date. I want to keep the amount, and the currency is typically going to default incorrectly from my customer, so I don't need that. We typically don't modify the method of payment or any of these fields over here to the right, so I'll select those. I can also select buttons that I want to skip in my tab sequence. So typically what happens when you're moving from the header to the lines of a form and you're tabbing, the system will go through the buttons first before it's going to get down to the grid. So when I'm tabbing across, I want to skip this mark selected and the unmark all and the show document buttons so that I can easily get down to this grid automatically. So once you're done setting up your tab sequence, then you're ready to start using it. I'm going to go ahead and close the form and just kind of show you what that tab sequence looks like now. So with my cursor in the customer field, I'm going to go ahead and press tab once, and you'll notice that my cursor automatically moved to the check payment reference. The next field is deposit slip. Again, if you're not using the field, skip it or hide it. Then amount, then the description, and my next tab takes me all the way down to the grid. It's a little bit hard to visually see, but there is like a darker line around this mark column. And now I'm ready to start marking my transactions or searching for the invoices that I need to settle. Now, before we start settling transactions, I want to start with my third tip, which is adding the important columns to the grid and rearranging the columns into the grid to make sense for you and how you use it. So I'm going to open up that personalization toolbar again by clicking on options and then selecting personalized toolbar. And I'm going to hide a few of these columns, so I'll select the hide option. Let's say I don't really need this identifier type. I also don't need the currency column. Maybe everything we do is always in the same currency. If, for example, we don't use cash discounts, right, we could hide all of these columns. I do want to keep my amount to pay column, but we don't use cross rates or billing classifications or fines or interest notes or interest amounts. So I'm going to hide all of these columns that I don't need. Now, maybe I need some additional columns. So I'm going to go ahead and click on add a field. And I'll need to click into the grid where I want to add some fields. This will open up the insert column screen, and now I can select the additional fields that I want. So I'm going to scroll through this list and find the details. Or the additional columns that I want to add. So for example, let's say I want to add in the order account. I'm going to scroll down and select order account. This is super useful if you've got like parent and child relationships between your customers. The order account will let you see what the child account is for a particular payment. Maybe I also want to add in the document date, so I'll scroll up and choose document date. And if there's any additional fields, I could choose those as well. Maybe description is another field that might make it easier to identify if I'm selecting the right transaction. Once you've selected all the columns that you want, you simply click the update button, and those columns will be added to your grid. If you want to move these columns around, you can use the move tool in your toolbar, or you can close this, and if you've got the new grid control enabled, you can simply just drag and drop columns by grabbing a hold of the little dot that appears when you hover over the grid header and drag and drop those columns to where you want. So I'm going to drag these around and get them the way I want. Let's say I want the amount to pay to be way over here to the left. You may also want to consider your tab sequence in this grid. So if you don't want to have to tab over the transaction identifier and get straight to the amount to pay column, you could set up your tab sequence down in the grid as well. Now this brings me to my next tip. So cursor again back up in the amount field. I'm going to go ahead and put an amount in here. I'm just going to type 500 because I don't know what the exact math of my payment's going to work out to be. I'm in the description field now because I pressed tab again. I'm going to press tab again, and now I'm down in the bottom portion of the screen and my cursor is on this mark column. So if you want to settle transactions like a champ, use the space bar to mark the transactions. So when you're looking at the invoices that you need to settle, you can simply use the arrow keys on your keyboard to move up and down through the list. And if you want to select a transaction for settlement, you simply just mark that checkbox by pressing the space bar, and then you can use the down arrow and continue pressing. So I can tab over to my amount to pay column and update this to the portion that I do want to settle. So I'll set that to 2048. It's actually 2045. And now you can see my remaining amount to be settled is 0. I can see that here in the remaining field. So now I've fully settled this payment. Once you're done and you've marked all the transactions that need to be marked, you're ready to save this in the journal. You can do that by clicking on the Save in Journal button up at the top, and you'll notice when you hover over this button, it shows you that the keyboard shortcut for this is Alt-Enter. So I can simply press Alt-Enter on my keyboard to save this into the journal. Once it's saved into the journal, you can now see that my cursor is back into that customer field, ready for me to enter my next payment. So I can start typing in the name of that customer and I'm good to go. Those are all the tips I have for you today to show you how you can be a champ at entering customer payments as an accounts receivable clerk. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you've got another tip you want to share, put it in the comments below. Be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications, and we'll see you next time on Dynamics 365 Unboxed.